We would call as our first witness Robert Cornwall.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us your name and business address, please?
Robert A. Cornwall, 1103 Schrock, S-C-H-R-O-C-K Road, Suite 401, Columbus, Ohio, 43229.
And what do you do for a living, Mr. Cornwall?
I'm the Executive Director of the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association.
And how long have you been the Executive Director of the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association?
Just over 30 years.
People have referred to BSSA. Is that the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association?
That's the acronym that's used to identify Buckeye State Sheriff's Association.
And what are the duties and functions of the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association?
Our primary function is to perpetuate the office of sheriff. We work with the legislature in developing laws that both determine what the sheriff's duties will be and how those applications will be made. We also are a conduit for information exchange between the other law enforcement groups within the state of Ohio.
And who are the members of the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association?
Membership is open to the 88 sheriffs that are in Ohio, along with their deputies, as well as citizens throughout the state of Ohio.
And what is your role as the Executive Director?
I act primarily as a counselor to the sheriffs of the state, working on the legislation that affects their office. I'm a registered lobbyist at the State House. Also, I do program development for training for the sheriffs, for the newly elected sheriffs who they have to go through by statute. Also, their annual 16-hour training that they are required to have. And then also on the business side of the house, the programs that generate dollars for the operation of the association.
And you, in your role as Executive Director of Buckeye State Sheriff's Association, did you work with former Sheriff Tim Swanson?
Absolutely did.
In fact, Tim Swanson was an officer of the organization.
Not only an officer, but he's past president of the association, yes.
And have you had occasion to work with Sheriff Maier of Stark County?
Yes, I have in the capacity as sheriff and prior to that.
In your role, do people contact you to talk about qualifications to be sheriff?
Yes, especially around election time, usually a year and a half, 18 months to 24 months prior to the election. Oftentimes I'll get questions from potential candidates that ask, boards of elections that have asked, legislators that ask.
And why, in your opinion, are you qualified to answer those kinds of questions?
Well, I think it's because, one, I assisted in the drafting of the legislation back in 1987, along with Representative Ron Gerberry, who was the primary sponsor of the bill. We worked with the Legislative Service Commission, known as LSC. We also worked with the Senate side as the bill progressed through the process. Having that as a background, and then the 20-some years plus that I've worked with candidates that have been successful in becoming sheriff.
And do you do this with one political party, or do you do it with both political parties?
We have no political parties that we affiliate with.
When we talk about the statute, we're talking about 311.01, correct?
Correct.
Tell us a little bit, since you were involved in it, tell us a little bit about the history of the statute, why it came about, and its import.
Two reasons that it came about.
Objection, what's the relevancy? The statute says what it says, it is what it is. It's a matter of the history, how it got there.
You may be looking for some legislative intent, so we'll go a little bit.
Well, I would object if he thinks he's not a legislator. And legislative intent, as the Supreme Court said in a case I referred you to, comes through the court's reading of the statute.
And
I object on
and the notes of the legislature, so I don't know.
Is he going to present things from the legislature? I doubt it.
Maybe we'll find out. We'll go a little bit and see what.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about the history and the intent of the statute.
When I first came to the association, I had been with the Franklin County Sheriff's Office for 10 years prior to taking this job. In doing so, the sheriffs that were in office at that point in time wanted to develop a professionalism image throughout the state of Ohio. They had pretty much the same kind of qualifications as did other elected officials, with the exception of the coroners, the engineers, and the prosecutors. The sheriffs wanted to look at their job as a profession also. In so doing, we put together a committee and looked at some kind of parameters to move it above the basic kinds of criteria that are there for elected officials. In addition to that, they were also looking that this may be a way to increase their salary. As a profession, this would allow them to receive better compensation than they had been receiving.
And when did the statute come into play?
1987.
And we're going to talk about obviously sections 8 and 9 of the statute. Have you had an opportunity to review those sections of the statute and compare them to Sheriff Maier's qualifications?
Yes, I had that opportunity.
I want to talk about 8A, which is the statute that says the applicant has obtained or held within the 4-year period ending immediately prior to the qualification date a valid peace officer certificate of training issued by the Ohio Peace Officer Training Commission, has been issued a certificate of training pursuant to 550305, and within the 4-year period ending immediately prior to the qualification date has been employed as an appointee or as a full-time peace officer as defined in 10971, performing duties related to the enforcement of statutes, ordinances, or codes. Does Sheriff Maier meet that requirement?
Objection calls for a legal conclusion. He, as far as I can tell, doesn't have that type of qualification. That goes to the ultimate conclusion before this board. Would also point out he's somewhat biased. His organization joined in a losing amicus brief before the Ohio Supreme Court. Should not be allowed to. This whole line of testimony is irrelevant, and he is not credentialed as an expert in this area of law. Even if he were, in the courtroom, a judge would shut you down and say, "That's my job. That's a legal conclusion. I make that decision." Object to the whole line of questioning.
Well, I agree we're not in the courtroom. And we have the ability to listen outside the rules of evidence, listen to what we think might be appropriate.
Every witness that is testifying is taking the stand and saying whether Mr. Maier does or does not meet the requirements. That's what every witness is doing.
Right. And I'm allowed to proceed.
All right. 8A. Does Sheriff Maier meet the requirement?
As I read the statute, yes, he does.
Why?
Because he has complied with the term within. And you have to look at both sections, both 8A and B, because they're worded separately and differently. That being in 8A, it's a term called within. So it's within the 4-year period of time that he had to have his peace officer training certificate, and he had to be employed full-time, of which he did both. As opposed to 8B, which you've already stipulated that he did not meet, because that's for the 3 years immediately preceding the qualification stage, which he does not meet.
And you get called upon often by people with questions about Section 8?
Yes, I do.
Let's move on to Section 9. 9A says the person meets at least one of the requirements. We'll start with A. Has at least 2 years of supervisory experience as a peace officer at the rank of corporal or above, or has been appointed pursuant to Section 550301, and served at the rank of sergeant or above in the 5-year period ending immediately prior to the qualification date. Does Sheriff Maier meet that requirement?
I believe he does.
Why?
Same objection, just an ongoing, continuing objection, so it's a line of questioning.
Why?
Because, again, it is within the 4-year period, or 5-year period immediately preceding the qualification date that you have 2 years. It does not say 2 consecutive years. It could be first year, last year, or anything in between. As I looked at Sheriff Maier's qualifications, then Mr. Maier's qualifications, he did have 23 months at the Department of Public Safety as a deputy director, overseeing the operations of the Ohio State Highway Patrol and the Ohio Investigative Services. and commissioned as a peace officer, and therefore did have supervisory capacity. In addition to that, in the 3 months he's had since as sheriff of Stark County, that adds up to 26 months, which is more than 24.
Now, are there other sheriffs around the state that also have the 2 years of supervisory experience that are not consecutive but are broken up?
There have been, yes.
Objection calls for speculation and hearsay and is not relevant. This isn't about, for instance, this isn't about the Athens County Sheriff who's a member of his organization who's currently under indictment. It's not about him. It's about George Maier. That whole line of question is completely irrelevant.
We gave you wide discretion as well, Mr. Chairman. You're here to listen to what everybody has to say about this protest.
Thank you. Now, in addition, 9A, 2 years of supervisory experience as a peace officer, the rank of corporal or above. As the executive director of BSSA for 30 years, involved in the creation of the statute, and your knowledge of sheriffs around the state, do you have to be in a uniform to meet that 2-year requirement?
No, you do not.
Are there others around the state who have met that 2-year requirement not in uniform?
Yes, they have.
Continuing objection.
Is the
We understand, but we can move on to a different area.
all right. Now, 9B. The person 9B has completed satisfactorily at least 2 years of post-secondary education, or the equivalent, and it goes on. Have you analyzed Mr. Maier's qualifications as to whether he meets 9B?
And he does 9B as well.
How does he meet 9B?
Because there is an equivalency in there that either you have satisfactorily completed 2 years of post-secondary education, or the equivalency in semester hours or quarter hours.
Now, there should be in front of you a packet like this. Is that?
Yes.
If you would go to Exhibit L. Exhibit L is a letter from the Stark State College to Sheriff Maier. We didn't have to read it, but my question to you is, in your jurisdiction around the state, have you seen these kinds of letters from other schools regarding sheriff applicants?
Yes, I have.
And are there, it talks about an equivalency of college semester hours. Is that what you mean for meeting the requirements of 9B?
Yes, I do.
Are there other sheriffs around the state who have met the 9B requirement in the same manner?
Correct.
Same objection.
I'm really not concerned about around the state, but I mean, keep it to his opinion with respect to what's before us.
Now, and obviously the requirement, you would agree, is to be either 9A or 9B, correct?
It's an or situation.
But it's your contention he meets both.
Correct.
Roughly, how many times have you been called upon by people with questions about sections 8 and 9? Is this like once a year, more often?
I wish it were only once a year, but no. And in all honesty, especially the 18 months to 24 months prior to the election, it's probably on a weekly basis, 2 or 3 calls a week.
You get 2 to 3 calls a week on 8 and 9?
Yes, I did.
Hold on, 1 minute. No further questions.